Okay, now YouTube, this was requested. Now tonight we're covering the East Harlem legend, straight from Wagner Projects, Purple City Stand Up. Now when it came to his block that he ran, it wasn't just a block, it was a gold mine. Now the hustler I'm talking about is Bob Lemon. Now he was known for pushing heroin, so pure it killed addicts on contact. Bob Lemon's rise was fast, brutal, and unforgettable. Now, what the streets didn't know at first was the secret behind his supply, his connection to one of Chinatown's most feared gangs, the Flying Dragons. Now, of course, he didn't deal with them direct, but that was his man. His man was Boy George Ferraris. Now, Boy George, he was getting it. He was getting that dope, man, at good prices, man. And he just, man, the Bronx, he just took over, man. Now, one Harlem kingpin and one Chinese tread and one deadly heroin pipeline that flooded New York City in 1980s is basically the story. The tragedy of Bob Lemon's story isn't just about how much money he made or even the destruction his product caused. It's about how he went from a 2-year run with Boy George's Obsession crew to serving nearly 35 years in prison. Now tonight we're going to break down the rise and fall of Bob Lemon. And we'll answer the burning question. How does a man spend 3.5 decades in prison for a run that barely lasted 2 years? Now, Bob Lemon, he came up in East Harlem, Wagner Projects. Now, before he got with the Obsession crew, he had a little small run. Now, and of course, the Wagner Projects was one of the toughest environments in New York City during the time. By the late 70s, early 80s, Harlem was already soaked in heroin, but Bob didn't want to be just another corner boy. He wanted to be a kingpin. And by that time, the 1980s crack and heroin boom hit crazy. Bob Lemon had already carved out his empire. Now this block, 122nd and 2nd Avenue, a block that would become legendary. From sunrise to sundown, his crew operated what was essentially a heroin supermarket. On a good day, the spot pulled in $500,000 in cash, $500,000 every single day. Money came in so fast, workers couldn't even keep up. Now, one hot afternoon, the block was so overwhelmed, addicts lined up around the corner. Workers running out of bags, money piled up everywhere. It was chaos. Bob, he made a call. No one else would dare. He shut down the block. Now, for 1 solid hour, nobody sold a thing. Customers were forced to wait. His crew regrouped, stacked the money, and restocked. By the time they reopened, the line was twice as long. Now, that's how much money they was bringing in, man. The fucking clientele was crazy. Now, that's how disciplined Bob was. He didn't run the block like a corner. He ran it like a corporation. There's times where it got so crazy and the fiends was getting so out of line and hard to control. Man, they had to put hands and feet on some fiends, man. They had baseball bats just to keep people in order. Where they stashed their product at, they had dogs guarding it, man. It was just, it was just out of pocket, man. But what separated Bob Lemon from other dealers wasn't just the money, it was the product. He was pushing China White, a heroin so pure, so deadly that users were overdosing on the spot. Addicts would chase it anyway because nothing else compared. Now, one night, a new face copped 2 bags from Bob's workers. Minutes later, he collapsed in a building lobby, dead before help even came. Now, word spread instantly. Now, you would think that, a situation like that would scare customers off, but instead, man, they had the opposite effect. Addicts wanted it even more. If it's killing people, it must be the strongest out, and that's what they was looking for. Bob's brand became famous. Not his brand, but Boy George's brand. His heroin was the kind that you feared, but they couldn't resist. Now the streets whispered, where was Bob Lemon getting his supply from? And of course the answer shocked many. They couldn't believe that behind Bob Lemon's heroin pipeline stood Chinatown's most feared triad gang, and that was the Flying Dragons. This wasn't just Harlem level weight. This was international, heroin flowing straight from Asia into Chinatown, then into Harlem and the Bronx and many areas. Bob Lemon, he wasn't just a hustler, he was a distributor for one of the deadliest pipelines in the city. By the mid-1980s, Bob Lemon, his connection with one of the biggest names in New York City drug gang, Boy George. Now, Boy George ran the infamous Obsession crew. Now, an obsession, that's what he stamped on his pure bag of dope. Now, a Dominican Puerto Rican operation that dominated Washington Heights and the Bronx, mainly Puerto Rican. Now, for Bob, Lincoln with Boy George was like joining the majors. He would move massive amounts of heroin and they loved it. For the crew, man, it was insane. Every 2 or 3 days, Bob Lemon would have a worker send back $250,000 in cash to the Bronx. Now, that was his drop-off, and he was a great earner for Boy George. One time, Bob was driving through the Bronx with a duffel bag full of cash at a red light. 2 stick-ups kids spotted him. Man, they tried to box him in with their car. Now, Bob swerved, flooring the gas, weaving through the traffic. He barely made it out. Later, he joked to his crew, if they only knew what was in that bag, that's how much money he was getting. Now, that was Bob's reality, man. Living like every drive could be his last. Now, the money was flowing so heavy, his lifestyle showed it. One day, you could catch him in a BMW 750, laid back. The next, he'd pull up in a red Ferrari with the MCM seats. One summer afternoon, Bob rolled up on the block in that red Ferrari. Music blasting. Kids froze mid-basketball game. Because people didn't know what the fuck was that John. That machine he pulled up in, it was different. A Ferrari, you know, people was used to driving BMWs, Volkswagens, Volvos, and all that. But a Ferrari, man, you had addicts waiting in line. They forgot about their sickness for a second just to stare. It wasn't about moving heroin. Bob was selling the image. To his crew, he was motivation. To the feds, he was a flashing red target. Now, here's the tragedy. Now, Bob Lemon, he only had about a 2-year run with the Session crew. 2 years at tops. But when it all came crashing down, he ended up serving 35 years behind bars. Now, you gotta think, why did he do so much time for a short run? You know, by the late 80s, the RICO laws were designed to crush whole organizations. Ties to Boy George meant you were going down for conspiracy, not just possession. Now, $500,000 a day wasn't just street money. That was like cartel level money. So the feds, man, they had to make an example. The purity factor. Overdoses from his dope made him look like a public health crisis. Prosecutors ate that up. The flashy lifestyle, Ferrari one day, BMW the next. To the feds, he wasn't just a dealer, he was a symbol of profiting off of misery. The timing, his bust came right after the Obsession crew collapsed. The government wanted trophies. Bob Lemon was one of them. At just 24 years old, Bob was sentenced to life. Now, when the heat came down, probably like a couple years after Boy George went down, Bob, he fled, man, and he headed to Florida, hoping to hide out until things cooled down. So he did his thing in Florida, and then he came back to New York, and one day shots rang out. Bob got grazed in the arm, and at the hospital, man, they knew who he was, man. They knew he was moving serious weight. Hours later, the cops came through. His freedom ended in the hospital. Now, at the age 24, Bob Lemon, he was given life. Now, when he was given life without the possibility of parole, man, it could be discouraging, but in 2020, he had a pandemic release. In 2020, you know, during the height of COVID, Bob Lemon finally came home after nearly 35 years in prison. He stepped into the world completely different. Harlem wasn't Harlem, of course, and the game wasn't the same. And yet, his fight wasn't over. Now he had to battle ICE to keep him from being deported. After 3 decades inside, you know, freedom was still complicated. So what do we make of Bob Lemon's story? A 2-year run, 35 years behind bars, and lifetime of consequences. But of course, you know, people give him his props. The man who turned 122nd and 2nd Avenue into a heroin empire. The man who moved $500,000 a day. The man who linked Chinatown's flying dragons to Harlem's Obsession crew. Bob Lemon's story is a reminder that the streets don't just take your money, it'll take your future. Now, before we get up out of here, I'm gonna address the Boy George comments about Alpo. Now, Alpo claimed that Boy George always hated on Alpo because he was free. Boy George stated, who was this kid Alpo? He's not even making more money than my lieutenants. Now, part of that might be true, but when it comes to money, man, it doesn't overshadow the mark that you can leave. So when it comes to a story, the money is just part of the story. It's about the mark that you left. Alpo left a mark in Harlem, and other boroughs in New York, and he left marks in Virginia Beach. He even left marks in DC. So everyone has a story connected to Alpo. So that's why these other people, man, their story is nowhere near Alpo's story. So we could just leave it at that. Now, this was the story of Bob Lemon, the Harlem kingpin from Wagner Projects, who built an empire on pure China white, only to watch his freedom vanish in a hospital room at 24 years old. And it leaves us with just one haunting question: was it worth it? But that's it, people. I appreciate all the love. Don't forget to check out my other videos. Check out the playlist. If you're new, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit up the Patreon for longer videos and exclusive videos. Hit up members22.com and cop your fragrance. Don't forget to get in the comments. Don't be a stranger. Get involved. Get the likes up, man. And y'all take it easy out there. I'm out.